Let me tell you about the night Sarah Burris made a choice that would change everything. She had $32, 7 days until eviction, and a stranger bleeding on her doorstep at midnight. Most people would have turned him away. Sarah opened the door. She didn't know the man was a Korean crime lord. She didn't know his enemies were watching. She just knew a child was dying. And that single moment of compassion pulled her into a world where kindness was a weapon, and love could get you killed. Sarah Burris pressed her palms flat against the kitchen table, staring at the bills spread out like a losing hand of cards. $32. She counted again, slower this time, as if her fingers might discover money that wasn't there. But the number stayed the same. It always stayed the same. The eviction notice pinned to her refrigerator gave her exactly 7 days. 7 days to find $850 for rent, plus another $200 in late fees. Her hands shook as she folded the worn bills and tucked them into the pocket of her sweater, the same sweater she'd been wearing for 3 days straight because the heat had been shut off. Outside, the storm hit like it had a personal grudge against her house. Thunder cracked so loud the windows shuddered in their frames. Rain hammered the sagging wooden walls, finding every gap, every weakness. The weather forecast had called it a once-in-a-decade storm. Sarah called it Thursday. She opened the cabinet above the sink. 1 can of soup. A half-empty box of crackers. A jar of peanut butter she'd been rationing for a week. Her stomach clenched, but she'd learned to ignore hunger. It was just another voice demanding something she couldn't give. The lights flickered. Sarah held her breath. Not tonight. Please, not tonight. The power bill was 2 months overdue. One more strike against her name in a system that had already decided she didn't matter. Her phone buzzed, a text from the clinic reminding her about the $1,200 medical bill from when she'd gotten pneumonia last winter. She'd walked to the emergency room in the snow because she couldn't afford to get sicker. Now she couldn't afford to get well. 3 months ago, Sarah had been fired from the manufacturing plant. Restructuring, they'd called it. 12 years of showing up early, staying late, covering shifts no one else wanted, none of it counted when the numbers didn't add up. Since then, she'd applied to 47 jobs. 47. Not one callback. Not one interview. In this town, if you didn't know someone, you were no one. Sarah had grown up knowing what it meant to be invisible. Raised by a grandmother who worked herself to death cleaning other people's houses so Sarah could have school supplies and a winter coat that fit. She'd promised herself she'd do better, be better. But here she was, 34 years old, alone in a house that was falling apart as fast as her life was. Guilt was a familiar weight on her chest. Shame, too. She'd thought about asking the church for help, but every time she picked up the phone, pride choked the words back down. Stupid pride. What good was dignity when you were drowning? The cold seeped through the walls. Sarah pulled her sweater tighter, curled into the corner of the couch under a blanket so thin she could see through it. The house creaked and groaned like it was in pain. Maybe it was. Maybe they both were. Then came the knock. Sarah's heart slammed against her ribs. It was past midnight. No one knocked on doors at this hour unless something was terribly, desperately wrong. This neighborhood wasn't safe after dark. Everyone knew that. She stood slowly, fear crawling up her spine. Through the peephole, she saw a man drenched to the bone, his dark hair plastered to his head, water streaming off an expensive-looking coat. His face was hard, controlled, the kind of face that didn't ask for anything. But his eyes were wild with something that looked like terror. And in his arms was a little girl, wrapped in a jacket 3 sizes too big, her small face flushed red, her lips pale, her eyes squeezed shut. On his collar, just visible in the porch light, was blood. Every instinct Sarah had screamed danger. Stranger. Midnight. Storm. Blood. Run. But Sarah had been a nurse once, before the certifications expired, before she couldn't afford the renewal fees. And she knew what a high fever looked like. She knew what happened when a child's temperature spiked too high, too fast. Her hand was on the lock before her brain caught up. She opened the door. And everything changed. If this story moved you, stay with us, there's so much more to come. Don't miss what happens when kindness collides with a world built on power and secrets. The storm rushed in like it had been waiting for permission, wind slamming against Sarah's chest, rain soaking the floor. The man standing on her porch was taller than she'd thought, broad-shouldered, built like violence, but his voice cracked when he spoke. Please. The word came out raw. She's burning up. My car broke down half a mile from here. I saw your light. Sarah didn't ask questions. She stepped aside. Bring her in. Now. The man moved quickly, carefully, like the child in his arms was the only thing in the world that mattered. He stepped into Sarah's cramped living room, and suddenly the space felt even smaller, the air heavier. Sarah grabbed the cleanest towel she had and a bowl of cool water from the kitchen. When she came back, the man had laid the little girl on the couch. The child was trembling, her breath coming too fast, her skin hot enough to feel from a foot away. Sarah knelt beside her, pressing the damp towel to the girl's forehead. And as the stranger stood there, dripping rainwater and blood onto her floor, Sarah realized she just let something dangerous into her life. She just didn't know how dangerous yet. But to understand why Sarah opened that door, why she risked everything for two people she'd never met, you have to know where she came from. You have to know what it cost her to survive this long. You have to know that Sarah Burris had already lost everything once before. Sarah worked quickly, her hands steady even as her heart hammered. She'd learned a long time ago that panic didn't save lives, action did. What's her name? Sarah asked, pressing the cool cloth against the little girl's burning forehead. Lily. The man's voice was tight, controlled, but she could hear the fear underneath. His accent was subtle but unmistakable, Korean, maybe. The way he shaped his vowels, the slight formality in his phrasing. Lily, sweetheart, I need you to stay still for me, okay? Sarah kept her voice soft, soothing, the way she used to talk to frightened patients in the ER. The girl's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. Sarah glanced at the man. How long has she been like this? Since this afternoon. It got worse an hour ago. He stood rigid, hands clenched at his sides like he was forcing himself not to intervene. Even soaking wet, even afraid, he carried himself like someone used to giving orders, not taking them. Sarah noticed details she'd missed before. The watch on his wrist, expensive, foreign, the kind that cost more than her yearly rent. His hands were scarred across the knuckles, old wounds that had healed wrong. And the blood on his collar wasn't just a smear. It was splattered, deliberate. She chose not to ask. I need you to get me ice, Sarah said. Freezer. Whatever I have. He moved immediately, no hesitation. When he returned with the half-empty ice tray, Sarah wrapped cubes in a thin dishcloth and placed them gently at Lily's pulse points, neck, wrists, under her arms. Lily, baby, I know you're tired, Sarah whispered, brushing damp hair from the child's face. But you're safe now. I've got you. For the first time, Lily's eyes cracked open. Brown, unfocused, glassy with fever. But she looked at Sarah. Really looked. And then her small hand reached out and grabbed Sarah's wrist with surprising strength. The man exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Sarah stayed there, kneeling on the floor beside the couch, murmuring comfort, monitoring Lily's breathing, changing the cloths every few minutes. The storm raged outside, but inside, the only sound was Lily's shallow breaths and the steady drip of water from the man's coat. An hour passed. Then 2. Slowly, painfully slowly, the fever began to break. Lily's grip on Sarah's hand loosened but didn't let go. Her breathing evened out. The flush in her cheeks faded from crimson to pink. "She's going to be okay," Sarah said quietly, relief flooding through her. The man's shoulders dropped. He closed his eyes for just a moment, and in that moment, Sarah saw something crack in his armor, raw, desperate gratitude. "Thank you." His voice was hoarse. He looked at Sarah like she'd pulled his daughter back from the edge of death. Maybe she had. "What's your name?" Sarah asked. He hesitated, weighing something she couldn't see. "Kim Taesung." Sarah nodded. She didn't ask why he'd hesitated. Didn't ask about the blood, the scars, the men she'd glimpsed watching from a black car down the street when lightning lit up the road. She didn't ask because some truths arrived when they were ready. Lily's breathing deepened into real sleep, the first peaceful rest she had in days. But even unconscious, her fingers stayed wrapped around Sarah's hand. And Kim Taesung watched them both with an expression Sarah couldn't read. Dangerous and tender all at once. Like a man who knew exactly how to destroy the world, but would burn it down to save this one small girl. Sarah woke to silence. The storm had passed. Pale dawnlight filtered through the broken blinds, casting stripes across the worn floor. Lily was still asleep on the couch, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Sarah's neck ached from sleeping upright in the chair beside her, but she hadn't been able to let go of the child's hand. Kim Taesung stood at the window, perfectly still, watching the street. Then Sarah saw what he was looking at. 3 black SUVs idled silently at the curb. No engines running, no headlights. Just there, like they'd materialized from the morning mist. Men in dark suits stood beside them, 4, 5, maybe 6, hands clasped in front of them, faces impassive. Waiting. Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Who are you?" The question came out shakier than she'd intended. Kim turned slowly. In the daylight, he looked different. Sharper. The expensive coat had dried into crisp lines. The watch on his wrist caught the light. Everything about him screamed power, control, danger. "I apologize for frightening you," he said quietly. "That was never my intention. Those men outside are mine." His voice was calm, matter of fact. "They've been searching for us all night." Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. "Searching for you? From what?" "From people who want to hurt Lily." Kim's jaw tightened. Her mother was killed 4 months ago. Since then, we've been targeted. The word hung in the air like a blade. Sarah's mind raced. The blood on his collar. The scars on his hands. The way he stood like violence was a language he spoke fluently. This man wasn't running from danger. He was danger. "I should go," Sarah whispered, backing toward the door. "You should take her, Anne. Please." Kim's voice stopped her. Not commanding. Asking. "Let me pay you. For your help. For your kindness." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. Sarah didn't need to open it to know there was more money inside than she'd seen in years. "I don't want your money. You need it." It wasn't cruel. Just true. His eyes swept the room, the overdue bills, the bare cabinets, the eviction notice. I can see that you need it. Shame burned in Sarah's chest, hot and bitter. I'm not for sale, she said. Sarah? The small voice froze them both. Lily sat up on the couch, her hair tangled, her eyes still heavy with sleep. But she was looking directly at Sarah, recognition clear on her face. Don't go, Lily whispered. Kim's expression cracked. Just for a second, Sarah saw past the armor, past the control, and glimpsed a man who'd already lost everything once and couldn't survive losing it again. He looked at his daughter. Then at Sarah. Just a few days, he said, and this time it wasn't a command. It was a plea. Please. Stay with her. Just until I can make sure she's safe. Sarah looked at Lily's small hand reaching toward her. At Kim Tae-sung, this dangerous man brought to his knees by love for his child. At the envelope full of blood-stained money she desperately needed. Just a few days, Sarah heard herself say. She didn't know it yet, but she just crossed a line she could never uncross. The estate sat behind iron gates at the end of a private road Sarah would never have known existed. As the SUV pulled through, she pressed closer to the window, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with the world she'd left behind just hours ago. Marble. Glass. Manicured lawns that stretched toward a house, no, a mansion, that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Men in suits patrolled the perimeter, earpieces visible, hands never far from their jackets. Sarah's stomach twisted. What had she agreed to? Lily squeezed her hand tighter as they walked through the front entrance. The foyer alone was bigger than Sarah's entire house. Chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Everything gleamed, cold, pristine, untouchable. Ms. Burris will stay in the East Wing, Kim said to a woman who appeared from nowhere, dressed in crisp black. Near Lily's room. The woman nodded without expression and gestured for Sarah to follow. The bedroom they led her to had a king-sized bed with more pillows than Sarah knew what to do with. A private bathroom with marble counters. A closet bigger than her old kitchen. Sarah stood in the center of it all, clutching her plastic bag of belongings, and felt like an imposter. But Lily refused to let her hand go. The nightmares started that first night. Sarah woke to screaming, high, piercing, terrified. She ran barefoot down the hall and found Lily thrashing in her bed, eyes wide but unseeing, crying out words Sarah couldn't understand. Lily, baby, wake up. You're safe. You're safe. But Lily didn't wake. Not until Sarah climbed into the bed and pulled her close, rocking her like she used to rock the children in the pediatric ward, whispering comfort until the trembling stopped. When Lily finally opened her eyes, she grabbed Sarah's face with both hands. Don't leave, she whispered in broken English. I won't, Sarah promised, even though she didn't know if she could keep it. The next afternoon, Sarah was walking past Kim's study when she heard his voice, low, cold, speaking rapid Korean into a phone. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Then he switched to English, and the words stopped her cold. I don't care what it costs. Find him. And when you do, make sure he understands what happens to people who betray me. A pause. No witnesses. No mercy. Sarah's hand trembled on the doorframe. She forced herself to keep walking, but her heart hammered against her ribs. An hour later, she watched through the window as Kim knelt in the garden with Lily, helping her plant flowers. He was patient, gentle, smiling at something his daughter said. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with such tenderness it hurt to watch. Two men. Same body. One a loving father. The other a monster. Sarah didn't know which one scared her more. That evening, as she tucked Lily into bed, Sarah noticed something outside the window, a black sedan parked across the street, just visible through the trees. It hadn't been there an hour ago. The headlights flicked on. Then off. A signal. Sarah's blood ran cold. She pulled the curtains shut and checked the lock on Lily's door twice. Somewhere in the house, she heard Kim's voice giving orders. Sharp. Urgent. And Sarah realized the danger Kim had warned her about wasn't something distant or abstract. It was already here. Watching. Waiting. And she was standing right in the middle of it. Kim found Sarah in the library 3 days later, staring at a book she wasn't reading. Lily was napping upstairs, finally resting without nightmares, and the house felt too quiet. We need to talk. He closed the door behind him, his expression unreadable. Sarah set the book down, bracing herself. I want you to stay, Kim said. Permanently. As Lily's caregiver. Kim. $50,000 a year. Housing here, on the estate. Full medical coverage. Protection. He spoke like he was negotiating a business deal, not a life. Whatever you need. 50,000. Sarah's mind stuttered on the number. That was more than she'd made in 2 years at the plant. More than she'd ever hoped to see again. That's blood money, she said quietly. Kim didn't flinch. Yes. The honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. I can't. You can. He stepped closer, his voice low but not unkind. You're already living in it, Sarah. Sleeping under my roof. Eating food I've paid for. The only difference is whether you admit it. Shame burned hot in her throat. I came here to help Lily. And she needs you. Kim's control cracked just enough for her to see the desperation underneath. She hasn't slept through the night in 4 months. She doesn't speak to anyone but you. You've given her something I can't. What's that? Safety. The word came out like a confession. Not the kind guns can provide. The kind that comes from someone who cares without wanting anything in return. Sarah looked away, her chest tight. You don't know me. I know you opened your door in a storm. I know you had $32 and still chose to help a stranger's child. Kim's voice softened. I know you're better than this world I've built. That's why I need you in it. Why? Sarah met his eyes. Why do you live like this? Why choose? I didn't choose. Kim's jaw tightened. I was born into it. My father ran the syndicate before me. When he was killed, I was 17. I could lead or I could die. There was no third option. There's always another option. Not in my world. His expression hardened. Power is the only language men like me understand. The only thing that keeps Lily alive. The weight of that truth settled between them like stone. There's something else you need to know, Kim continued, pulling out his phone. He showed her a photo, grainy surveillance footage of a man with a jagged scar across his face. Park Jin-ho. He runs a rival organization. 3 weeks ago, his men tried to take Lily from her school. Sarah's blood turned to ice. He knows she's my weakness. And now, Kim's voice dropped, dangerous and afraid all at once. My sources say he's mobilizing again. What does that mean? Kim looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. It means they know about the girl, Sarah. And they're coming for her. It happened in the garden. Sarah had taken Lily outside to pick flowers, just 20 feet from the house, well within sight of the guards. The sun was warm, the air sweet with jasmine. Lily was laughing, actually laughing, holding up a yellow bloom like a treasure. Then the black van screeched through the gate. Everything happened too fast and too slow at once. Men poured out, 3, 4, guns already drawn. Shouting in Korean. One of Kim's guards went down before he could reach for his weapon. The crack of the gunshot split the air. Sarah's body moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed Lily and ran. Not toward the house. There wasn't time. She dove behind the stone fountain, wrapping herself around the little girl, making her body a shield. Stay down, baby. Don't move. Don't make a sound. But Lily was screaming, sobbing, her small body shaking so violently Sarah could barely hold her. Footsteps. Heavy. Fast. A hand grabbed Sarah's hair and yanked her head back. Pain exploded across her scalp. She looked up into cold eyes and the barrel of a gun. Let go of the girl. The man's English was broken but clear enough. No. Sarah's voice didn't shake. She tightened her grip on Lily, pressing the child's face against her chest. Let go or I shoot you. Then shoot me. The man's finger moved to the trigger. Lily screamed. Sarah! Sarah! The world erupted. Kim's men came from everywhere, the house, the perimeter, the shadows Sarah hadn't known they were hiding in. Gunfire shattered the afternoon. The man holding Sarah went down, blood spraying across the white stones. Another collapsed near the van. Shouting. Running. Chaos. Sarah curled tighter around Lily, her own body shaking now, her ears ringing from the noise. Then strong hands were pulling her up. Kim's voice, sharp and commanding. Move. Now. Inside. Sarah couldn't let go of Lily. Her arms had locked, her body refusing to release the child even as Kim tried to guide them towards safety. Lily clung to her just as fiercely, wailing Sarah's name over and over. They made it to the house. The door slammed shut. More guards surrounded them. And then Kim was kneeling in front of Sarah, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes searching her face for injuries. Are you hurt? Sarah, look at me. Are you hurt? She shook her head, but she couldn't speak. Couldn't process what had just happened. Her hands were stained with dirt and someone else's blood. You could have been killed. Kim's voice cracked. Not with anger. With something raw and terrified. You should have run. Why didn't you run? Sarah finally found her voice. I wasn't leaving her. Kim stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. His jaw worked, emotions warring across his face, fear, gratitude, something deeper she couldn't name. Lily was still wrapped around Sarah, refusing to let go, her tears soaking through Sarah's shirt. Kim's hands dropped from Sarah's shoulders. He sat back, his control completely shattered. You stayed, he whispered. Even with a gun to your head. You stayed. Sarah met his eyes. Of course I did. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Sarah wasn't an employee. Wasn't a caregiver hired for her skills. She was family. And Kim Taesung finally understood what that meant. The house was quiet that night. Too quiet. Lily had finally fallen asleep in Sarah's bed, her small body curled against Sarah's side, one hand clutching Sarah's shirt like a lifeline. Sarah stared at the ceiling, listening to the guards patrolling outside, and couldn't stop shaking. She'd almost died today. They'd almost taken Lily. At midnight, she found Kim standing on the balcony outside his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring into the darkness like he was searching for answers that wouldn't come. You can't keep living like this, Sarah said quietly. Kim didn't turn around. I know. Lily can't keep living like this. I know that too. Sarah stepped beside him, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Then why? Why stay in a world that's trying to kill you both? Kim's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, finally, I was 12 when they murdered my father. Sarah's breath caught. They made me watch, Kim continued, his voice hollow. Put a gun to my head and made me watch them beat him to death. Then they asked if I wanted to die too, or if I wanted to lead. He took a long drink, his hand trembling slightly. I chose to lead. Because leading meant power. And power meant no one could ever make me helpless again. Kim looked at her then, his eyes dark with old pain. I built this empire on blood and fear because it was the only way to survive. The only language these men understand. And Lily? Sarah asked softly. What language does she understand? Kim's control cracked. He set the glass down hard, his hands gripping the railing. She shouldn't have to understand any of it. She should have a normal life. A mother who's alive. A father who doesn't have blood on his hands. She has a father who loves her, Sarah said. That matters. Does it? Kim's voice was raw. When that love comes wrapped in violence? When every day she's alive is a day someone might try to take her from me? Sarah didn't have an answer for that. So instead, she said, I was terrified today. Kim looked at her sharply. When that man put a gun to my head, I was terrified, Sarah continued. But I wasn't going to let him take her. Not because you're paying me. Not because I'm brave. She met his eyes. Because I love her. And she hesitated. I care about you too. Even though I shouldn't. Even though I know what you are. Something shifted in Kim's expression. Softened. You see what I am, he said quietly. And you stayed anyway. Someone had to. The corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. They stood there in the quiet, the space between them charged with things neither could say yet. Then Kim's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression hardened. What is it? Park Jin-ho just made a public threat. He's not hiding anymore. Kim's voice was ice. He wants war. The next morning, Sarah found Lily at the kitchen table with crayons scattered everywhere. The little girl was drawing, her tongue poking out in concentration. What are you making, sweetheart? Lily held up the paper, beaming. 3 figures. A tall man with dark hair. A woman with kind eyes. A little girl holding both their hands. Above them, in careful letters, family. Sarah's throat tightened. She looked up and saw Kim standing in the doorway, staring at the drawing like it was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. Their eyes met across the room. And neither of them looked away. Park Jin-ho was dead. Sarah learned about it the way she learned about everything in Kim's world, through tense phone calls in Korean, through the sudden relaxation in the guard's shoulders, through the way Kim finally slept for more than 3 hours straight. She didn't ask for details. She didn't want to know. 2 days later, Kim found her packing. What are you doing? His voice was carefully neutral, but Sarah heard the tension underneath. You said once the threat was gone, I could leave. She folded another shirt, not looking at him. It's gone now. Sarah. You don't need me anymore, Kim. Lily's safe. You can hire someone better. Someone who actually knows what they're doing. Stop. Kim crossed the room and caught her hand. Just stop. Sarah finally looked at him. His eyes were raw, desperate. I'm sending you away, he said. But not because I don't need you. Because I do. And that puts you in danger. I can make my own choices. Not this one. His grip tightened. Park Jin-ho is gone, but there will be others. There are always others. And if they know you matter to me, if they know what you mean to Lily. No. The scream came from the doorway. Lily stood there, tears streaming down her face, her small body shaking with fury and fear. No. Sarah stays. She stays. Lily ran across the room and threw herself at Sarah, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist with desperate strength. Don't go. Please don't go. Please. Sarah knelt down, pulling the sobbing child close. Lily, baby. You promised. Lily wailed. You said you wouldn't leave. Sarah's heart shattered. She looked up at Kim and saw her own anguish reflected in his face. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah whispered, the decision crystallizing even as she spoke it. I'm staying. Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She stood, keeping Lily close. I understand that this world is dangerous. That loving you both means accepting violence I can't control. I understand all of it, Kim. And I'm still choosing to stay. Kim stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd never heard before. Why? Because Lily needs me. Because you need me. Sarah's voice steadied. Because somewhere in the last few weeks, you stopped being a stranger and became my family. Kim's control finally broke. He closed the distance between them, his hand coming up to cup her face with startling gentleness. I love you, he said, the words raw and honest. Not because you saved Lily. Not because you stayed when anyone else would have run. But because you see exactly what I am, the blood, the darkness, all of it, and you still look at me like I'm worth something. Sarah's breath caught. You are worth something. But Kim, she held his gaze. Love doesn't erase what you've done. It doesn't make the violence okay. I know. If I stay, things have to change. For Lily. For all of us. Kim's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I can't promise I'll become a good man overnight. I'm not asking you to. Sarah's hand covered his. I'm asking you to try. I will, he said. For her. For you. I'll try. Lily squeezed between them, wrapping her small arms around both their legs. Kim knelt down, and the three of them held each other in the quiet of that room, a family born from storm and violence and impossible choices. It wasn't a happy ending. Not yet. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, that was enough. 6 months later. Sarah stood in the garden, watching Lily chase butterflies through the flowers they'd planted together. The little girl's laughter rang out clear and bright, a sound that had once seemed impossible. Higher, Sarah! Watch me jump higher! I'm watching, baby. Be careful. The estate looked different now. Still guarded, still secure, but softer somehow. There were toys scattered on the lawn. Children's drawings taped to the refrigerator. Lily's shoes by the door, right next to Sarah's. Small things. Normal things. Things that mattered more than marble floors and chandeliers ever could. Sarah pulled her cardigan tighter, not from cold, but from habit. She still caught herself sometimes, reaching for sweaters that were threadbare, counting money she no longer needed to count. The bank account Kim had set up for her had more zeros than she'd ever imagined, but it didn't feel real yet. What felt real was Lily running toward her, arms outstretched. What felt real was the home they'd built from broken pieces. "Miss Sarah?" One of the guards approached, his expression respectful. They all treated her differently now. Not like an employee. Like family. Mr. Kim called. "He'll be home in an hour." Sarah nodded, smiling. Kim had been making changes, slowly, carefully, but deliberately. Meetings instead of violence. Negotiations instead of threats. He told her last week that he was working toward legitimacy, toward a life where Lily could be proud of her father. It would take years. Maybe decades. The darkness didn't just disappear because you wanted it to. But he was trying. That was what mattered. That evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed, Sarah found herself standing on the front porch. The same porch where everything had changed. Kim joined her, sliding an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" That night, Sarah said quietly. "The storm. When you knocked on my door." "I've thought about it too." Kim's voice was soft. "What you must have seen. A stranger. Blood. A dying child." "I saw a father who was terrified," Sarah corrected. "And a little girl who needed help. You could have turned us away." "I know." Sarah leaned into him. "But I didn't. And my entire life changed because of it." Kim pulled her closer. "Mine too." They stood in the quiet, watching the stars emerge. Somewhere inside, Lily slept peacefully, surrounded by safety and love. Down the road, Sarah's old house still stood empty now, but not forgotten. A reminder of where she'd come from. Of what kindness could cost, and what it could build. "Do you ever regret it?" Kim asked. "Opening that door?" Sarah thought about the fear, the violence, the impossible choices. She thought about Lily's nightmares and Kim's darkness and the world she'd stepped into without fully understanding. Then she thought about Lily's laughter. About the way Kim looked at her like she was his anchor. About the family they'd become against all odds. "No," she said simply. "Not once." Kim pressed a kiss to her temple, and Sarah closed her eyes, breathing in the jasmine-scented air. That night, she had $32 and 7 days until eviction. She'd been alone, exhausted, invisible to a world that had stopped caring. That night, she'd opened her door to a stranger in the rain. And found a family. The end.